If you're new to whiskey, sometimes it's hard to know where you should start, what whiskeys you're going to enjoy the most. It's also sometimes hard to know which whiskeys you should avoid. I'm Matt, I'm the whiskey nerd, and today I'll be talking about 5 types of whiskeys I think beginners should avoid. Now, a while back, I did a video about, if you're new to whiskey, start here. Here's 5 whiskeys, examples of different categories I think beginners will enjoy a lot. And someone said to me, hey, if there's somewhere beginners should start, surely that means that there's somewhere beginners shouldn't start. And I said, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. So today I'm making that video and we're just going to get right into it with the first big whiskey I think people should avoid: a cask strength peated whiskey. Now, nothing is wrong with a cask strength whiskey. There's nothing wrong with a peated whiskey, but those are 2 kinds of whiskeys that are like a bit hard to get into. Sometimes a really heavy, smoky whiskey can take someone a bit of, getting used to. Maybe they should try out some lightly peated whiskeys before they move into those heavy peated whiskeys. Also, sometimes something that's like a strong cask strength whiskey, like 50-60% with alcohol by volume, sometimes those can be really strong, and so those can be hard to enjoy. So if you put those 2 things together, you get a whiskey that can be hard to enjoy for beginners. Now, this here is the cask strength version of the Teeling Black Pit's peated single malt Irish whiskey, and it is a nice whiskey. I think this is a really nice whiskey. It comes in at 56.5% alcohol by volume, so it's, as cask strength goes, it's not super high, but it's quite high. That's 113 proof in American numbers. It's also quite heavily peated. So interestingly about this is it's actually peated about the same level as an Islay scotch, one of those really big heavy peated whiskies, but because they distill it 3 times, it doesn't have those medicinal notes, so it can be a really nice, enjoyable kind of Irish whiskey if you want to get into heavy peated whiskies, but those medicinal iodine notes aren't really your cup of tea. Something like this, like a triple distilled, heavily peated Irish whiskey, can be very good. But I wouldn't recommend it for a newcomer. I wouldn't recommend it for a beginner at all, just because it's 2 big kind of powerful flavors adding on to each other to make it into a whiskey that I think just for a beginner, no. Start off with something a bit easier, start off with something a bit lighter, something you can enjoy. They even call it, I think it says it here, the big smoke. This is a big hitter, big smoky, big strong whiskey. And for beginners, I think they should start somewhere else. And in keeping with that idea of somewhere that's some whiskeys that are a bit too strong, my next whiskey, a cask strength sherry bomb of whiskey. This here is the Dunville's, it's a single malt, finished in PX sherry casks, comes in at 56.1% alcohol by volume, big, nice, single malt Irish whiskey, comes in at cask strength, lots of sherry finishes. I think this is 13 years old and it spent 7 years in those PX sherry casks, so it's really a lot of sherry notes into it, and that comes through as this kind of I always describe this kind of sherry hit as meaty, not flavorful like meat obviously, but it's that big, heavy, thick, rich. There's cigar box, leather, tobacco, earthiness with all the sweetness you would get from a sherry. But if you just put whiskey into a sherry cask for 6 months or something, you're gonna get a nice bit of sweetness. If you leave it in there for 5, 6, 7 years, you're gonna get all that sweetness, and then also that oakiness, the earthy notes, all those rich, heavy notes. And sometimes for people, if they're kind of new to whiskey and they think, oh, a nice sherry finish, that's going to give me something sweet, a PX sherry finish, even sweeter. The PX sherry is the sweetest kind of sherry. They might not be expecting it to be that heavy, that almost savory, that really thick, meaty boy of a whiskey. So it's one of those whiskeys that I think, again, this here 56.1%, so it's a little bit weaker than that, but still at cask strength. And that, again, those flavors combined, those big, heavy, juicy flavors, the whiskey, the sherry, all those oak notes coming together, I think for a newcomer, no, I wouldn't say start here. I'd say Dunville's make some great whiskey, like the Ecklandville Distillery are putting out under the Dunville's brand some really nice whiskey, some really nice, enjoyable whiskeys. Some of them are a bit peated, some of them have a nice sherry finish, but these ones here where they're just that heavy, juicy whiskey, again, like that peated cask strength single malt. Here, a big, heavy sherry hitter of a cask strength single malt. Wouldn't recommend that. Getting away from those big, heavy duty whiskies is something here that is again a heavy duty whiskey, but for me it's in a different way. So this here is a experimental style of whiskey from the Cologne distillery. This here is a really nice whiskey. I think it's really nice. I've been drinking it for a while. This is the Saga Land mixed mash bill whiskey from the Cologne distillery. It comes in at 59.8% alcohol by volume, so it's the strongest whiskey on the table. But that's not why I'm picking this one out as a whiskey I think newcomers should avoid. Yes, it's going to be strong. Yes, it's going to have a load of notes to it that like might overpower like a person who's not used to high strength alcohol. But the point here is that it's experimental. So this here is a mixed mash bill whiskey. It's one of those whiskeys that comes in with a mixed mash bill. It's not actually, yeah, it says it here on the bottle. It's not actually like a single pot still or a single malt Irish whiskey, which has, you know, strict rules about what can go into it. This has some like oats, wheat, rye. It's got some different kind of grains in there. And that's why I'm saying this wouldn't be something for beginners, because if you're trying to get a handle on what, like, you know, a single malt tastes like, a single pot still tastes like, a single grain tastes like, something that's a bit experimental, I think, with those multiple grains coming in, yes, it's fun to taste. Yes, it is a very good whiskey. But again, it's that idea of like, if you're new to whiskey, if you're a beginner, something like this, which is just taking you off in some interesting direction, might not be the whiskey for you. Like, it's something that you could definitely try out later on. Like, if you know what a single malt is supposed to taste like, if you know what a single pot still whiskey is supposed to taste like, when you get into these experimental ones, you go, oh, that must be the influence of the rye. Oh, that must be the influence of the wheat. You can get those flavors, you can pick them out. Whereas if you don't understand what like malt tastes like, an unmalted barley tastes like, something like this where you have those extra flavors in there competing, again, it's just gonna be something that I don't think people are gonna enjoy all that much. And then keeping in that vein of whiskies that are a bit different, something like this. This is the Method of Madness Amberana cask whiskey. This is a nice whiskey, comes in at 46% alcohol by volume, which for me is like my favorite kind of drinking percentage. It's nice, it's not too strong, not too like heavy hitter. But the thing about this whiskey, it was finished in Amberana wood. And now, not every country in the world lets whiskey distilleries play around with wood. Ireland is one of them. So in Scotland it has to be finished in oak. In America it has to be finished in the whiskey to be aged, in American white oak. Ireland should be aged in a wooden cask. And one of the things about that is it lets distilleries like Method of Madness play around with acacia, pine, in this case Amberana wood. And Amberana is from, like, it's from South America. They use it to age, I think it's cachaça. It's like this kind of sweet liqueur, but that's not really where this comes from. This is just about the wood. That flavour of the wood actually makes it it reminds me of carrot cake, of like, there's ginger, nutmeg, cloves with this really big hit of like vanilla buttercream frosting. It's surprising to me. Like, Amberana is one of those whiskeys, one of those woods, if I smell it, I'm like, I know that's Amberana wood. That's just so distinctive. It's so almost overpowering. Like, this is a single pot still Irish whiskey, supposed to be a bit spicy, but if you smell it, all you can really smell is the Amberana. Now on the taste, that single pot still does come through, but on the nose you're just getting big hit Amberana wood. You're getting it right off the bat. And that's why, again, for a beginner, if you're getting used to like what oak tastes like, and then what a sherried oak, what a maybe an Oloroso oak, or a PX sherry, Amontillado, the different kinds of sherries, you'd be like, okay, that's great. And then even within oak, Irish oak, American oak, French oak, Scottish oak, they all actually have slightly different flavors. Like, they all actually add a slightly different note. Like Irish oak, it gives more like sweet vanilla notes, whereas French oak gives this like darker, almost like chocolatey vanilla, like earthy vanilla notes. American oak gives almost like cinnamon hard candy. There's the different kind of flavors you get from different oaks. So bringing in different kinds of woods, I think if you're a beginner, just stay away from that. Again, it's like that kind of experimental style. If it's something where you know what oak tastes like, and then you bring in something like this, you can go, oh, that's that influence. I can understand it now because I get that flavor, because I can compare it to a different flavor I already know. And lastly, for a whiskey, I think beginners shouldn't really start with something like this. Something big, crazy, bold. This comes in a massive presentation box. It is a 18-year-old single malt from the Teeling, from the Teeling Whiskey Company. This isn't from the Teeling Distillery because they're not 18 years old yet. It's a lovely single malt. I opened it a little while ago. I haven't yet reviewed it yet, but it is 18 years old. bourbon cask matured and then finished in muscat wine cask, and it is like, ooh, lovely. It is special. This is a whiskey that, like, I think I'm gonna sit down. I'm gonna get to reviewing it, but it's one of those whiskeys that I'm like, oh, I want to sit with this. I want to have a few drams of this before I go in to do a review, because it does have a nice bit of complexity. It does have a nice bit of weight, but also it's something kind of special that I want to enjoy. And that's why I would say, because this here, these whiskeys, you can see that presentation box, they're kind of expensive. These kind of really fancy high-end whiskeys, I think just for a beginner, I wouldn't recommend them to start there. I'd say getting a standard Teeling single malt, getting that kind of flavour of, okay, that's a single malt, great, and then eventually moving up to these whiskeys, yeah, that's fine. But this kind of whiskey where it's just insane, where it's just a massive outlay of money for a whiskey that's, I mean, the same amount of whiskey as these whiskeys here. It's not like it's a bigger bottle, yeah, it's older, but still at the same time, this here is 18 years old, so it's going to be expensive, so it's going to have that price tag to it that maybe you won't fully appreciate, or you won't fully be able to enjoy it, or you might feel guilty about it, or you might just buy it and then leave it on the shelf and forever. So I think if you've got a friend who has whiskies like this, ask them if you can have some, ask them if you can try them, maybe compare a young single malt against an old single malt, but buying a whole bottle of it for a beginner, I would not recommend it. And there you have it. Those are my kind of 5 choices for whiskies I think people, if you're new to whiskey, maybe you should avoid. And if you've got any different thoughts, let me know in the comments below. I'm Matt, like I said, I'm the whiskey nerd. I put out whiskey reviews on Wednesdays, I put out whiskey cocktails on Fridays, and every now and then on Monday I talk about different kind of things about whiskey. I make different cocktails, or I just kind of compare them like that to talk about the whiskey industry. Like I said, if you've got any recommendations for other kinds of whiskies people should avoid, like maybe really bottom shelf cheap whiskies that might put someone off forever, let me know down in the comments below. But I've got 5 whiskies in front of me, and I think I'm going to enjoy them. So I'll see you next time. Sláinte.